Sometimes the healthiest marriages aren't the quiet ones. Sometimes they're the loud ones, the ones where two people actually say the uncomfortable thing out loud, on camera, in front of millions of people, instead of letting it fester behind closed doors. And that's exactly what makes Kelly Ripa and Mark Consuelos so strange, so refreshing, and so oddly comforting to watch every single morning. Because somewhere along the way, life stopped being just a talk show for them. It became something closer to a pressure valve. A place where two people who have been married for nearly 3 decades quietly work things out in real time, right in front of an audience that has grown to feel like extended family. Most couples argue in kitchens. Most couples argue in cars, in hallways, in hushed voices after the kids go to bed. Kelly and Mark do it on a stage with cameras rolling, and somehow it doesn't feel like a performance. It feels like something much more honest than that. If you've watched the show for any stretch of time, you already know the rhythm. Kelly will bring up something small. Mark leaving cabinet doors open, Mark snoring, Mark forgetting to tell her something important. And instead of brushing past it, they lean into it. They let the moment breathe. And what starts as a throwaway joke often turns into something that feels a little more real, a little more raw, a little more like two people actually negotiating a life together in front of us. That's the part that hits people emotionally. Not the bickering itself, but the willingness to let viewers see it happen unfiltered. Because here's the thing. Most celebrity marriages we see on television are curated, edited, polished until every rough edge disappears. But Kelly and Mark seem to have made a different choice somewhere along the way. They decided that the messy parts of marriage, the irritations, the misunderstandings, the small resentments that build up over decades, don't need to be hidden to be respected. They just need to be talked through, even if that talking through happens live, unscripted, in front of an audience holding coffee cups and watching from their couches. Many viewers noticed early on that this wasn't typical daytime television banter. It felt different. It felt like watching two people who trust each other enough to bicker without fear that the bickering means something is broken. And that trust, that's really the emotional core of what makes this dynamic so magnetic. Think about what it actually takes to argue playfully in public. It requires a level of security most couples spend years trying to build. You have to know deep down that your partner isn't going to use a public disagreement as ammunition later. You have to know the relationship can hold the friction without cracking. Kelly and Mark clearly have that. And audiences can feel it even if they can't always articulate why. There's also something deeply human about watching two people navigate ordinary marital friction instead of pretending it doesn't exist. Because so much of celebrity culture sells us the fantasy, the perfect anniversary post, the perfectly lit vacation photo, the caption about 29 years and still going strong, with zero acknowledgement of what it actually took to get there. Kelly and Mark, whether intentionally or not, sell us something closer to reality. The version where marriages work. Where you annoy each other. Where you say the thing out loud instead of swallowing it. It almost seemed like, over time, live became less about celebrity guests and more about this ongoing, semi-public negotiation between two people who genuinely like each other but also, very clearly, get on each other's nerves sometimes. And that combination, affection plus irritation plus humor, is what real intimacy actually looks like. Not the airbrushed version. The lived-in one. There's a particular kind of chemistry that only exists between people who've spent decades together, and it shows up in the smallest details. The way Kelly rolls her eyes before Mark even finishes a sentence, because she already knows where it's going. The way Mark doesn't get defensive when she calls him out. He leans into it, plays along, sometimes even escalates it for comedic effect. That's not conflict avoidance. That's comfort. That's two people who have had the real version of this argument privately enough times that the public version can be lighter, funnier, almost affectionate in its delivery. Body language tells you almost everything here. Watch closely and you'll notice they rarely turn away from each other during these moments. Even when Kelly is mock annoyed, she's still facing him. Still engaged. Still, in some subtle way, inviting him into the conversation rather than shutting him out. That's not what disconnection looks like. That's what two people look like when they've decided, again and again, to stay in the room with each other. And maybe that's part of why audiences keep coming back. Not because they're expecting a scandal or a blow-up, but because they're watching a working example of what it looks like to stay married for a long time without pretending it's effortless. Some fans wondered whether the on-air banter was simply a bit, a performance crafted for ratings rather than a real glimpse into their marriage. And there's probably some truth in both directions. Of course, television requires structure. Of course, some moments are shaped for pacing and rhythm. But even performance requires source material, and the source material here seems to come from something genuine. You can't fabricate the specific cadence of a couple who's had the same argument 100 times and found a way to laugh about it by round 101. What makes it resonate isn't the content of the disagreements themselves. It's rarely about anything dramatic. It's socks left on the floor. It's Mark answering a question Kelly didn't actually ask. It's Kelly interrupting Mark mid-story because she already knows the ending. Small things. Ordinary things. The exact kind of things that make up the actual texture of a long marriage, far more than anniversaries or grand gestures ever do. There's a possibility that this is exactly why viewers feel so emotionally attached to their dynamic, because it mirrors real life so closely. Most people don't relate to red carpet glamour. But almost everyone relates to being annoyed at a partner for leaving a cabinet open, or interrupting a story, or not listening the first time. When Kelly and Mark bring that texture onto a national stage, they're not distancing themselves from their audience. They're closing the gap. It also says something meaningful about how they define partnership. For them, apparently, marriage isn't about avoiding friction. It's about surviving friction with humor and tact. It's about being willing to be seen mid-disagreement instead of only showcasing the highlight reel. That takes a strange kind of vulnerability, even inside something that looks like comedy. There's also a quieter layer underneath all of this. The idea that airing small grievances publicly might actually be healthier than letting them pile up privately. Some relationship therapists have long argued that resentment grows fastest in silence. Kelly and Mark, whether consciously or not, seem to model the opposite approach. Say it. Let it be a little uncomfortable. Let it be a little funny. Then move on together rather than carrying it forward unspoken. While nothing has been confirmed about how much of their on-air chemistry mirrors their off-air relationship, the consistency over the years is hard to ignore. Marriages that are quietly falling apart don't usually sustain this kind of easy, spontaneous rhythm for decades. You can fake charm for an episode. It's much harder to fake it for 20 years straight, 5 mornings a week. There's something almost cinematic about watching a marriage evolve in real time on live television. Not through dramatic plot twists, but through small, repeated moments of choosing each other publicly again and again. A raised eyebrow here. A shared laugh there. An argument that ends not with resolution exactly, but with the unmistakable sense that both people are still fully in it. Maybe that's the deeper reason this resonates so widely. Not because Kelly and Mark are teaching viewers how to fix their marriages, but because they're modeling something simpler, the idea that a long relationship doesn't require perfection. It requires presence. It requires a willingness to keep showing up, even mid-irritation, even mid-disagreement, even when the cameras are rolling and there's nowhere to hide the eye roll. Perhaps the reason so many people remain invested in Kelly and Mark isn't simply because they've spent decades in the spotlight. It's because audiences continue to see something genuine in the way they navigate life together, disagreements and all. And maybe that's why moments like this stay with viewers long after the segment ends and the show cuts to commercial. So here's a question worth sitting with. When you think about the couples in your own life who've made it work long-term, is it really because they never argued, or because they found a way to argue that never made either of them feel alone in it? If Kelly and Mark's on-air dynamic resonates with you, it might be worth asking what that says about the relationships you've witnessed up close. The ones that lasted not in spite of friction but somehow because of how it was handled. What's your favorite Kelly and Mark moment? The ones that made you laugh or the ones that quietly said more than they probably meant to? Let us know what you think in the comments below.